Evil is back. The Drool King Lotor has returned with a dark energy that can destroy the galaxy. Our only hope? The Voltron Force, a team of 5 heroic pilots that control 5 awesome robot lions. When Lotor's monstrous road beasts attack, the lions come together to form Voltron, defender of the universe.
Oh! Let's Voltron! Oh! Let's Voltron! Oh! Let's Voltron!
Welcome, Voltron fans. This is Mark Morell, your host for Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast. We're here for another exciting Voltron Force review, and we have with us one of the actual writers who were involved in this episode. So I have to bring on my co-host, Greg Tyler. Welcome, Greg.
Hello, Mark Morell. Hello, Voltron fans across the universe. We are going to review Ghost in the Lion. But to help us review it is not only the writer of the episode, but also our friend and fellow Voltron fan and Sven fan, Tara. Welcome to the podcast, Tara.
Hi, everybody. Good to see you again.
Hi, Tara.
Good to see you.
Hi.
And, of course, we wouldn't be doing this episode if it wasn't for Jeremy Corey. Welcome, Jeremy.
Oh, welcome back. It's just like a warm pajamas. I slip right in out of the dryer. It's like we never left. It's been almost 10 years here, Mark, since the first Let's Voltron. We were all listening on our iPhone 5s or something.
Yes. Yes. So Jeremy was the supervising producer of Voltron Force, and he was also former creative director for WEP, and he's also the first co-host of this podcast.
That's right. That's right. And I don't know who these noobs, this stupid guy Greg is. I don't know if he's going to stick around or not. You better watch him get a driver's license. And so good to see you, Tara. I was saying earlier before we got on the air, it's like we're in New York Comic Con at a dive bar.
I
somewhere,
know.
all over again. So
I miss those days.
It's fantastic. Everybody looks great. You haven't aged at all. This is great. Everybody looks wonderful.
I'm still 12
I just
inside.
love resolution Zoom video.
Good filters, everybody. Good filters. So
Yeah.
This is a near and dear episode to my heart, and was really a pivotal memory and one of my favorite memories of my life, helping to write this. And we'll get into the good, the bad, the ugly of Ghost in the Lion.
This is awesome. So is that a special machine behind you that you have to put quarters in, or what do you have to do with that?
I think it speaks to all Voltron fans that if I were to come to you and say, there will be an arcade someday in your basement and it'll have all the games. You don't need the tokens. Aladdin's Castle, you don't need it. It's fine. It'll play. In fact, you can be able to play it in your hand. If I came to you and said there was a Nintendo, it was mini and it has all the games in it. We're living in an amazing time. It's so cool to even be able to talk about these things. And that's what this episode was, a dream come true in just, getting to help produce a cartoon. And I like to say that I was the fan on the inside who got the opportunity to do these things and work with some wonderfully talented people who put this to life. And, it has its challenges, and Voltron Force, the show, really straddled that time between, Netflix as a powerhouse in content and, kind of the transition from broadcast and being on, Nicktoons. So, but without Voltron Force, you wouldn't have Legendary Defender and a lot of these things. So as you all know who are there and who are in the chat rooms with us and on the forum, it really started the rebirth of Voltron as a brand as we know it.
I can tell you that if it wasn't for Voltron Force, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So it's completely changed my life.
Yes. And I have to say, I'm totally ready for this episode. I'm even wearing this special shirt. I usually keep this part of the day on, but I usually keep this. It's signed from all the Voltron Force voice actors, from Giles, Andrew Francis, Ashley Ball, Sam Vincent, Vincent Tong, Doran Bell. That I've never worn this shirt before, but I'm wearing it tonight for Let's Voltron. So many talented folks that have gone on to do awesome things.
That is awesome.
So cool.
That's right. Maybe we'll auction it off next VoltCon for charity. Might not be a bad thing.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Pre-warned, you can smell my Axe body spray through it. Grew Axe.
So Tara, I can see that you have an interest in a particular character based on your shirt.
This one? Oh, yes, the Viking, correct? Yes, he is.
Yes, the Viking.
He is my boy.
I have to mention that is the new Sven Lives shirt that is on Voltron.com, because if you remember, it used to have Voltron.com on the shirt itself.
Yes, it did. And
Hmm.
I've been bugging Tiffany for years that I need a new one because my old one I wore it so much I have holes in it. And
Oh,
every
wow.
Wow.
convention I would see her, Tiffany, I need a new shirt. Tiffany, I need a new Sven's Lives t-shirt. I need this shirt in my life. I bought two.
That design goes back to 2005 when the DVDs were first coming out. We worked with the
Yes.
St. Louis company Atomic Dust, Mike Spakowski, and designers who did that shirt. That was one of the first original bumper stickers, as you recall.
Hmm.
So it's great to see
Oh,
that
yeah.
Sven lives.
And you can only get
Yeah.
that information from Jeremy. You can only get that
Oh
here.
man, the memories. It's locked in his brain. When I'm gone, it will be in Chat GPT. But that's it. And Tiffany and Bob, of course, they remember. So, well, that's great, gang.
So
Good
do
deal.
we know how many Voltron episodes have been written on ChatGPT so far?
A lot of fanfic, a lot of
Yeah.
shipping going on at a massive scale is going on at Chad. But no, it's a really cool, exciting time, and it's cool to see looking at Ghost and the Lion on YouTube and Retro Bytes, and whether that has to do with DreamWorks and things. But seeing how many views that this thing has, and 2.5 million. So it's good to know that Voltron Force, the series, kind of lives on and has become one with the universe. And I think people appreciate it more as time goes on, because it was a unique and challenging way that it all came together. And by hook, crook, and Nook, we did that. And a lot of that credit goes to Bob Koppler for putting together the business deals, Tiffany for keeping the brand alive for so many years, and then Jason Netter for always believing in Voltron. And he's gone on to do things like The Boys, a little Amazon series, and has had a lot of success. So they were just believers, and mostly the fans, right, who never gave up on Voltron. So it was an awesome time. And I know the series has its critics, and rightfully so. And there's certainly things that we would have done differently, and certainly something like Legendary Defender, which has come to define Voltron for such a generation. I do hope they'll check out Voltron Force and see what writers like Todd Garfield were trying to do. And there's a lot of things to love in it, as you all know. You were there for the ride in 2011 when the Let's Voltron rap video came out. Keith Dawkins, former head of Nicktoons, just suddenly that just came out. I remember driving in and just like so excited. I was on the website, and then when the Swizz Beatz song came in, I was like, man, something I said on a conference call has turned into this promo and song. So I have no complaints. I was living the dream and still am.
And we're still doing Voltron.
We're still doing it.
We're still doing it, and Voltron is no longer just a pronoun or a noun. It is a verb and an adverb.
I need to change my LinkedIn. Identify as Voltron. I like it.
So you told us
pronouns
before
are Voltron.
You told us before recording you actually came up with the phrase and verbified Voltron. Is that right?
Right. Well, maybe better yet said I sold it in on the book, because that's what I remember distinctly being on the phone with Swizz Beatz and Jason Netter, and you're like, what do you tell this guy? I mean, he's like a freaking superstar. And we started to go into a little bit, and I said, well, let's Voltron. A lot of fans have kind of said it as a verb. He's like, okay, cool, and just played a little bit of that's actually a Lenny Kravitz riff, like him and Lenny Kravitz doing whatever and just laying down these riffs. And then hearing it was kind of shocking, but it works on a level, and it was cool to have an artist like Swizz Beatz of his pedigree involved in it. So it was a cool jam. I remember we didn't have too much money, what you thought was a lot of money at the time, but he's like, okay, so he really did it as a labor of love for it, but it added a certain cool factor to the show. But it's wild. I mean, that's a wild, unexpected, like Voltron Force, very much a mishmash of styles, sort of ramming together into one, and but a great time for sure. So yeah, let's Voltron. And then I remember, Mark and I talk about the original podcast and leaning on that. So hopefully it's taken off. All the kids on the TikTok hitting the Let's Voltron, but we love it. It's fun for us, and to us it does mean come together and let's get stuff done. Let's Voltron.
So the model that the animation used for Voltron Force, okay, you had a combination of 3D CGI and 2D animation, and that model has been used over and over and over again across many different cartoons and animation pieces. So what do you think, whose original idea was it to do it in 2D animation when combined with 3D CGI?
Well, early on, and I could probably find the document, there were lots of talks about, is this a Flash show ultimately? I know that sounds crazy, but what style would bring tonality to this? Obviously, being an original fan, anime to me, what eventually became kind of, if you were to ask me what the perfect looking Voltron show is, it's Legendary Defender, right? I mean, that's what was in our heads when we were thinking of things like an original Voltron OVA, which scripts were written for a Voltron, animated movie. We thought that would be a little closer, but everything came together like Voltron when it came to, all the pieces of the puzzle, from classic media to Nickelodeon Nicktoons. Keith Dawkins, who I mentioned, is a huge fan. He's now, heading up all the Harlem Globetrotters licensing. And really it was Bob Koppler putting in a lot of the sweat equity to make it work. And certainly Ted Koppler blessing all of it, sometimes not so. we had to wrestle him physically on some of this stuff. And because it was just a totally different marketplace, you understand, from what he was used to in 1984, going around and selling the show. So to walk into Ted's office and say, no, you actually have to give a piece of the toy and merchandise to the network. Like not only are they going to pay you a very nominal fee for this, so you'd really make your money on the merchandise, on overseas licensing, and going to different seasons. So there's a whole business Voltron happening at the same time. And certainly Jason Netter, Susan Norkin, putting it all together in Canada. We're going to do these tax credits and the hurdles that Bob Koppler did to the business hurdles to make this happen. It's a miracle, anything ever happened, but it really came together. And I think the look specifically, around that time there were shows. There was the Iron Man Nicktoons show, which I believe Jason Netter had some things to do with. So obviously I thought and pushed hard for the idea of the mecha to be separated from we wanted the warmth of 2D in the characters, which I still prefer, and still I think, as anime fans, I think it's gotten a lot better, right? We've seen CGI and 3D evolve, but the shows at the time in 2010, the CGI shows, that's tough, and that action and that, everything had a very deliberate camera movement, and there wasn't great, we all love whatever. Remember Beast Wars and all these early Reboot and all these early shows, and those were even before that time. So the blend,
the third
Iron
dimension.
Giant. I mean, there you go, Greg. I mean, there's in a couple of words why a full CGI show. But I see what they're doing with the new He-Man and things, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's finally kind of arrived, and you can do action. So very much, I was a huge Iron Giant fan. I still am. And when I think of giant mechas and scale, so was pushing hard for the 3D, 2D element. Did we get maybe the textures right and blending? Maybe not. Honestly, I don't even think there was an official art director on the show that oversaw all of this stuff. It was sort of hodgepodge together, a lot of it, if I'm being honest here. And that's why we listen to Let's Voltron to get the scoop. So the cohesive look wasn't quite there. So you see different character designs that aren't necessarily consistent with a lot of that. And I think, the director, Steve Gordon, John Delaney, really came in and tried to kind of cohesify a lot of that stuff, but it was a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. And the animation done at Toon City in the Philippines, wonderful, and I think played into the humor of it, which was Todd Garfield's heartbeat that he really brought into it. I can remember auditioning the story editors, and there were a lot of great folks out there working in all these different things. Some of these folks had written some of our favorite childhood things that was like, oh, you did this, and I was always the geek in the room, like, what you did, Brave Star, are you kidding me? So it was like wonderful. But ultimately Todd Garfield had come off of Secret Saturdays, which definitely has a fan following, and that blended 2D action and humor. And I think Todd was way ahead of the curve of humor being the staple that keeps a lot of these shows together. So it was this divide where you were either doing these epic action shows like the Thundercats remake that came out. And I was very jealous of that because I thought, oh my gosh, that's kind of the show that I, would have loved to have done. But that also, marketplace wise, didn't catch on because you had, SpongeBob ruling and you had these humor shows ruling. So it was smart to bring in humor. And I remember Todd's positioning on the pitch was, it's a self-aware Voltron show. The Voltron characters know they're in kind of a Voltron show. But we had such a challenge balancing because you had half the production team wanting all new characters, and you had the other half wanting like, hey, let's fit in the classic characters. So how do you update that? You know, I like to say that J.J. Abrams has that same problem, right, with the new Star Wars. So you were balancing so many characters and giving them things to do. And I think Todd did an amazing job of that, and really working things in where every episode stood alone, but yet cohesively worked together. And a lot of credit. I mean, you know, the majority, like, this is very much Todd's, you know, the humor and the writing in it, you know, really helped save the show from just being another action series. So it was super exciting. You remember Ben 10 was pretty big around the time as well. So there were a lot of different voices and influences when it came to the designs of the Lions, of Voltron, which I still think are super cool, you know, and Legendary Defender, I think, has some super cool elements as well. But we worked closely with Mattel, designers like Steed Sun, folks who, you know, were fans as well, and tried to bring a little bit of characterization, as you see in the Lions. And I shared the original models in 3D at Volcom. Tried to bring in, you know, Hunk's lion having the underbite, and, you know, Pidge's lion being a little more sleeker, and certainly the lioness of Blue Lion. So there's a lot of fun elements going on under the surface of Voltron Force. But the mood at the time, which makes this episode, it was such a hot flash and debated episode, is that there's too many characters. We need to be marketing this to a new generation of fans. And no one knows who Sven is. Tara, hold your ears. No one knows who Sven is. No one cares. So I had held on to this, you know, that we were going to get our favorite, you know, Norwegian or Swedish, whatever, our favorite Nordic guy in there somehow. So this was very much them giving me a chance to do one for the fans.
Not only Sven, you brought two original characters in.
Did it for you, Tara. I did it for you.
Because you brought in Nanny at the end.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Spoiler alert.
Believe me. If I would have had Ramel, I could have done it too. So, but you know, they didn't know some of the backstory, and us Voltron classic fans, how much Sven meant to us, and just like, you know, that was such a burned in memory. And now we know what was really going on in the brothers. But I feel justified in looking at Legendary Defender and how Shiro, such a character. So I feel like they, you know, the new filmmakers and the Legend of Korra folks and stuff, and the super talent, I feel like they got what we saw in Go Lion that could be translated into a new series. And they did everything we couldn't do, which was make it serialized and epic and definitely more, you know, this was very much an approachable kids show, Nicktoons, and I'm proud of it because I think it is an approachable show for, you know, younger kids. But understand, we were with, you know, Mattel psychologists who were telling us that at age 9, kids are out, you know, and that age they're doing video games. So you see that now, younger and younger. You see that with Batman and all these brands. They push younger for action figures, because we played with toys until 13. Some of us never stopped playing with toys, for sure. But that's that you saw the marketplace waking up to the idea of the kidult, right, as the marketing buzzword is. So now we walk through Target and we see aisles. They're aisles just for us, right, for classic fans. You had to one up me again, Mark, didn't you?
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
Fantastic. Yeah, there we go. Mine's spendy.
It's not about size, trust me.
No, it's about size. It's about how you use it. It's about how you use it. We've totally lost Tara. She's walked off, rightfully so. But yes, there we go. Oh, she's got. Oh, I remember that one, and even approaching Bob, because I think that one was deputized. The super deformed one, meaning like it was a rogue one that then became later official license. So anyway,
Bud.
Oh, fantastic, Mattel. Yeah, they did some great work on the Matty Classics line, as we all know and remember. That was fantastic. So so yeah, anyway, lots to get into, but I'm just setting the table for the mood of 2011. You know, no one had launched consumer products off of a Netflix series before. That is where, you know, Breaking Bad would go. And I think the Achilles heel of Voltron Force is that we didn't get it on Netflix sooner. And I remember sitting in my office going like, wait a minute, I think it's eligible for Netflix. And if it would have hit that January before the new episodes, remember how it was kind of like 12 episodes and then, or 13, and then it was almost like 2 seasons in one because there was
Right.
26, I think, 24.
Right.
Right.
I feel like if fans would have discovered that, or specifically kids maybe, would have discovered it that January, much like the Mad Men effect, much like how people were discovering shows on Netflix, just like they were using DVDs on TV shows, like, oh, here's all the TV show. I can binge watch. This was the first emerging of binging. I feel like that would have helped the ratings maybe with Nicktoons. And we can get into season 2 of Voltron Force and what was and what was supposed to be. But anyway, we're here. Tara wants to hear about Sven.
I wanted to know one thing. I wanted to know what would have happened with Sven's son.
Wow, you're just skipping right to the
Yes.
You took one of the questions out of my mouth, Mark.
Yes. Sorry.
Here's
That's
the
okay.
answer, and it may be entirely disappointing, but whatever you want, because there was no plans. You all named him Eric, I believe,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Mhm.
There was just the idea of getting that kind of stuff in was a win. It was like slipping it under, writing little Easter eggs, which I've been rewatching this episode. There's so many little nerdy Easter eggs in it. And some that made it in, some that didn't make it in. And I will find that first draft because I'm sure I went way too far and Todd had to reel me in. In fact, I remember the first draft of this, sending it over and, writing this, I really got into it. I remember going to my childhood bedroom and where all the spirits of the past would help me be my muse in this, and just forging things I was into at the time, like Lost Planet, the Arctic video game from Capcom, right? And then I listened to the 2 Steps from Hell, which, as you know, is like movie trailer orchestra. You'd recognize it from TV and commercials. Fantastic music composition. So it really had this epic theme, and then just channeled my inner child that had seen Optimus Prime die before me, right, and reborn, and just tried to bring a lot of those themes into it and really play with environments and scale. And after writing this, I remember submitting it to Todd and including all the 2 Steps from Hell. I think I bought it for him on iTunes. You couldn't at the time. I was like, when you read this, Todd, you must listen to this. And he was laughing at me like, dude, you are too much. But the sentiment was from Loris Kramer Lunford, one of the producers who was a big advocate for Todd and how it all kind of came together, and producer on Johnny Test and things, she was like, page 1 rewrite, dump it all, because it was so fan serviced and probably was way more serious of a episode than Voltron Force had up until that point. Wow. And I remember Todd talking to me and like saying, I don't know if this is our show, dude. Like, I don't know, So then he later came back and was like, because I said, you can do funny, and then we can have one that's a little more serious and a little more for the fans and things, and a little more mythology in there. And he goes, okay, I see what you're talking about, and came in and really tweaked it, punched up some of the moments, gave it some levity. Because I bet if we go back and read that one, it's pretty much fan fiction. But no, it's just all the 80s, and animated stuff put together. I had just had a son at the time, my son Diego. And so it was very much weaved in there of why would someone be driven to this? And you all know, after you have a child, you would do anything for this child. And that kind of stuff drove him. So it was interesting to bring back Sven as a tweener, right? A mix between a bad guy and a good guy. And it was just kind of, one for the fans. And Ghost and the Lion being, kind of a reference, Ghost in the Machine. And I think other working titles were Absolute Zero. And I love the idea of from Lost Planet that has a gameplay element where if you're exposed to the cold, you die instantly. But there's a ticking clock for it. So whether or not we pull that off artistically and in the animation, that remains to be seen, but it still kind of comes out, the stuff survives. You write these first drafts and just somehow in there, it's still your baby, but it's not quite, has the haircut that you expected. And in some cases a lot better. And in other cases, not as much. So it's always tough to connect what's in your vision to what actually unfolds given time and money, which it always seems to be ruled by.
I just wanted to go down memory lane real quick because this is what Voltron Force coming out is what pulled me back in
Mhm.
to the
Yes,
Voltron universe.
you've shared that before, and I never
Same
forgot.
here.
And
Yep,
I,
same
because
here.
I did shell, I don't know if I shared the story with you and Mark, but I know I did share this story with you, Jeremy. Actually, that night, me, you, and Tally, that first Comic-Con, we met having beers and pizza, but this thing it did. I'm not going to get into too detail. It pulled me out of a dark spot in my life, and
I
it
remember.
really
I remember.
showed me that there are still good people out there, and it did bring me to a whole bunch of new friends and brought me to you guys. And not only
Right.
that, but getting to see everybody at Comic-Con every year, finding something that I loved as a kid that I now love as an adult. And I am not
Yep.
afraid because honestly, right now, because I play World of Warcraft, so I'm a big gamer. And right
Mhm.
now, everybody's like, we want to watch the podcast. Why can't we watch it now? Literally, my Discord is blowing up right now. So they're like, everyone in my guild is like, why can't we watch this as you do it? I'm like, you guys are just gonna have to wait a few weeks. But I remember when you pulled me and Tally up on stage at New York Comic Con and we're showing pictures of our old Snarktron group, our RPing group on Twitter.
Oh yeah, that's
I
right.
don't know if you guys remember
Oh,
that.
that's right.
Yeah.
That we would do late night RPs on Twitter and all the role playing, and you know, I RP'd Romel and Tally was Lance and everybody else, and you know, we've all kind of gone our separate ways right now, but it was a good group of girls, and you know, it was just it was a fun time. So okay, rant over.
Well,
I'm
mission
sorry.
accomplished. No, I do remember that. I've taken that to heart as always, and yeah, I mean, if Voltron Force did anything, would reunite, and now it's become the fandom has only
Yes.
grown from there. But
Mhm.
we remember who was there. We remember who there was on the original forum. So thank you for that, and I've never forgotten that. So it really, and that's part of the special feelings I have when I see the show is working with all the people and then getting to meet everyone.
Yeah.
So the cool thing was you're watching the show, and at the same time, you can be on Twitter, and
Mhm.
the Voltron Twitter account was
Jeremy.
was talking to you. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
And you used to do raffles during the
oh
commercials.
gosh, yeah. Anything
I was
to
not
get
part of any of that. That's interesting.
interest. Yeah, early Twitter, right before Elon Musk. No, it was like anything to get some sort of insights. My approach was to do it like pop-up video, where you could be watching and I'd give you little behind the scenes things, and this was originally that, and sort of just try to make it a party, a watch along. And I remember during the premiere, which was a big deal at the time, Voltron trended. The hashtag Voltron trended, and I remember being up in the Escape restaurant with Bob and Ted and Nancy, and the whole Koppler family, the whole team. We were all watching the Voltron Force premiere, and that suddenly was trending, and I screen grabbed it, and I had to walk up into my office just like, wow, that just happened, like unbelievable. And granted, it had nothing. I was a stick in the fire, just like fanning it a little bit, this flame of Voltron fans coming back. But that was a big deal for Nicktoons. We heard back the next day, Jason Netter, none of our shows have ever trended on Twitter. What does this mean? How do we do it again? And so I was like, I remember thinking like, how would you do that again? How would you do that again? I guess you just put it on screen like hashtag Voltron. Now, it's a kid's channel. They're never going to do that, for something you're technically supposed to be, over 16, something. But I remember early on thinking networks should put hashtags on the show itself, which is now standard, right? Operating procedure, like encouraging you to do that. So that was another really cool, just career highlight for it. But it's all the fans. You all kept it alive through all of this. And, there was definitely, it was a debatable show, but I appreciate fans like you all who can embrace some of the, deficiencies of the show. And like I always say, like, there's a Voltron flavor for everyone. It doesn't have to be toxic. It's like Star Wars. Hey, you know what? It's all good. Go watch this. You don't like it? Watch the original. Like, it's all good. That the IP will never die. And it sounds like some of the best times are still ahead. So, but yeah, this was a pretty cool, fun episode to do. And I remember the beach scene specifically, starting off knowing we were going to go to the Arctic. So what do you do the opposite of that? playing with scale a lot in that. Wanting to, I inserted little jokes from, Larmina's spinning star kick, being a Street Fighter 2 fan, for those who remember that. Putting Laura, Laura in the bikini being a reference to, an old episode maybe doesn't hold up as much, but just trying to throw throwbacks in there anywhere I could. And just little lines and dialogue. Some of that was even like inter-office jokes. I think "Why You Be So Hostile" was a joke. I'm trying to remember who said that. But there's so many things that anyone who worked at WEP at the time would be like, I can't believe you put that in there.
So I love that you have segued us into the episode here with the beach scene.
That's right. Still
yeah,
technical directing over here, Greg.
You are so on it. It's awesome. So, and I do like the fact that you explicitly, planned out the contrast there and the climates there between the warm beach and the planet Krydor and all that.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely got to have the Castle of Lions as a sandcastle. You have to.
That was
this stuff if we were in a room.
That
right?
was so cool.
We'd have to do it.
That was so cool.
There's certain things you have to do it.
And I would say that the Voltron shows in general, don't sell the scale of the Lions or Voltron as well, or maybe as frequently as they could. And this episode really does that with the beach scene. And of course, the follow up when you see Sven do what he does at the end with the Blue Lion. That's just not something up to that point. There's no way anything like that had been done before. And selling the scale so in your face. Yeah. So
I appreciate that. And we tried. And I can't say we succeeded in, episodes with Lotron and things and other ones. I remember just like, it takes a really skilled director. I think Legendary Defender does a better job of it, which is the contrast. And we talked about things that came from the Mattel focus group and like, he has a sword that can cut open the moon and things, which we literally like put it as a, like, and then it becomes a question, of scale. But thank you for that, Greg. Some parts did, some parts I cringe at, to be honest.
As someone who was, making the, making the sauce, I mean, I would love to hear some of that.
Sure. Well, when you see sometimes the artwork drawn on something like Lotor's armor, or in this case, you really go into detail on like Sven's black ice armor, and you see the concept art and kind of the character turns of it. Sometimes it doesn't translate into animation as much, and maybe it's the textures and maybe it's just even the detail on that. So you really find yourself having these conversations around, it's this black ice and he's somehow got control of this black ice and he can do this with that. And there was probably powers that were then cut. But I remember Sven's black ice was definitely a thing. And of course, I'm always thinking of a cool toy, Hagarium infused, and kind of he can control it and he's learning to wield it. Does it come across completely in it? Maybe not. You kind of see it as just sort of this afterthought, which I felt like in later episodes, the Lotor armor that would come across, you saw it, but maybe it had too much detail. Maybe sometimes the simpler the better. But some of it, doing the Mastodon, and I'm sure Susan Norkin was like, oh, you're writing all these. We only had so many 3D shots per episode, so you had to use them sparingly. We were doing a Voltron show that sometimes you couldn't always show Voltron. So for every one of these episodes, you had to do something maybe that didn't have a lot of Voltron in it. You see how it's balanced out. Or another trick would be like, we're gonna have to do a flashback episode where everybody's remembering something. But there's still some stuff in here. Mayhawks, is an underappreciated character maybe, but ultimately the mastermind, his mecha legs and things, I love it. The voice actor, and I'm gonna have to look on IMDb, Ron Halder did an amazing job on that. But just so much little stuff. I remember Todd putting more humor into it by having, the baby and in it, vomiting or whatever, chucking on Mayhawks. But it was cool. I mean, for the most part, this turned out, I think there was a lot more blue and red lion fighting, like your background, Greg, on there. I think I had more stuff going on. The ice maze was definitely a thing, but just thinking of all the cool stuff that could be done. But for the most part, the interplay and the dynamics of Daniel and Lance and, hey, we're actually, freezing here, and him willing to sacrifice himself, which is a kind of a fun character moment. But there's just so many characters to service in this. And that's what's tough about some of this stuff. But overall, just being able to sneak in things like Nanny, at the end, who is for the fans. I mean, we could go on and on about Sven and what happened and Hall of Heroes. I can't remember if he died. I will find that first draft in it, but I remember there was definitely a need for an uptick, an upbeat ending, and more humor in a lot of this stuff. So, but yeah, overall, I mean, it was a blast, and I'm glad the episode gets still looked at today. But I don't know how is it received in the Voltron Force? Is this like, this is one for the fans? You all tell me.
With fans like Tara who loves Sven, this was definitely a big, huge episode for Voltron Force.
Yeah, you remember in the forums, it was like, hey, just wait.
Oh yeah, and then when the T-shirts came out, and then we're like, okay, what's going on here? And then saw that, and it was a moment. It was a moment.
Yeah, and shout out to Alan Marriott for doing the voice. I thought he nailed it. We had some awesome auditions, including one actor who passed away. I remember not Bruno Kirby, but Kirby Puckett. Kirby, I'll have to look it up. But I remember distinctly, I had to look it up when I saw that he passed away. Like, I remember that audition being really good for it. But I think Alan really just found that Sven voice, and talking to the OG producers like John Teichman, like, where did you get, who was smoking a cigarette and something else in 1983 or whatever they're producing this stuff for 84? Like, yeah, let's go with that accent as things on there, but it's become to define it so lovingly.
Speaking of, just real quick on the voice actors, Jeremy, I don't think you ever met my friend Linda, but she's same thing, huge Sven's fan. Her wife actually got Michael Bell on Cameo to sing in Norwegian "Happy Birthday" to her in the Sven voice. She sent me the video. Oh, it was awesome. And he was actually supposed to be at Comic-Con here in Huntsville, Alabama this weekend, but he couldn't come. So he canceled early in the year. I forget what happened, but yeah, he was supposed to be here. That would have been cool.
Yeah, I got a chance to meet him and a bunch of the original voice actors for the launch of the video game, which you remember on Xbox Live with THQ. Talk about a different time, the downloadable game. So that was a super thrill. Just I have it in my office. Neil Ross and everyone, Laura. I mean, that was a thrill. But that's what we were trying to do, is just pay homage to things that had come before. But it's amazing to see how much, Shiro Sven became a principal character, and just, again, all the creative that we were told not to do and to do. Like, the Legendary Defender is the opposite. I mean, that is what happens when you give it to, auteurs and folks with a track, and they creatively, go with it. I haven't even finished Legendary Defender. It's hard to watch because it's so good. It's such the show that, like, oh wow, this is exactly. So it's hard to be close to something and then see the, like, beautiful version of it. But again, I think there's room for all of it exists. So it's on my to-do list to finish Legendary Defender and check it all out.
Hey, just a quick side note while we review this amazing episode, Ghost in the Lion. We should point out that this is production number 117, the 17th episode. It originally aired November 27th, 2011. Story by Todd Garfield and Jeremy Corey, writer Jeremy Corey, director John Delaney, and the voice cast, all the usual favorites: Ashley Ball as Allura, Doran Bell Jr. as Vince, Shannon Kent as Larmina, Andrew Francis as Lance, Ron Halder as Mayhawks, Mark Hildreth of Lotor, Giles Panton as Keith, Ty Olson as Hunk, Vincent Tong as Daniel, Sam Vincent as Pidge, and last but not least, Alan Marriott joins the show as a guest, playing Sven. Now back to the review. So jumping ahead a bit more, Sven steals the Blue Lion. Spoilers! And he does so by doing the sci-fi equivalent of popping the steering column and hot wiring it. He basically pries up the little Voltcom thingamajiggy, and you've got the old school key slot. Yeah, Lion Jack. So, was it tough to sell something as small as that, where, he's doing something in this one little scene that was never seen in the show before? But of course, everyone is going to recognize.
That's exactly it. No, I don't remember that being a particular hard sell, right? Because it works with the narrative of how would he have gotten in. there were probably kids wondering what the hell was going on. they're just watching it for the next lion fight. But no, Gregor, I think that was an easy one. And again, like a lot of the Easter eggs we fit in, folks like you and I understand. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. We played around with that later with the super fan episode and throwing Easter eggs, which was divisive, but that was an easy sell.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I think Easter eggs like that, where if a kid or the intended viewer, the main demographic doesn't get it, it's just more interesting filler, but it doesn't detract from the story. I think that's totally the way to do that sort of thing. There are a lot of shows and movies today that look back and do so where they practically are beating you over the head, like remember this, remember that, remember this, and this.
Yeah.
I think this show does not go to that extreme, which is a plus.
Fair enough,
Right.
but I like to be beaten over the head, like the Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers movie and things. There's just the Super Mario Brothers movie. I mean, like, oh my gosh, am I the only one in the? No, we're all watching the Punch Out. We're like, oh my God, he's in the Punch Out Cafe, and like all this stuff. Like it continues to this day. It's a beautiful time, and we always talked about that. Like executives will be our age someday, and the decision makers will be greenlighting things that they loved, just as the 70s and 80s, and you saw, George Lucas loving Flash Gordon, so that's what we're seeing today is all the things that were precious to us. And God help us, right, when all the 90s stuff starts coming in and we have Salute Your Shorts and all that stuff. Sorry, 90s babies. There's just still, I feel like we got the best. We got the 80s and then just enough of the 90s before, in my mind, let's Freakazoid live action movie. Go for it.
The Hulk even said in that scene when they're looking at the security footage, he says, "Wow, this dude's old school."
This guy is old school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally purposeful. And thank you, Todd, for letting that stay in.
Yeah. So one thing that is a pivot from Defender of the Universe is that Sven seems to be, is he a native of this planet, Krydor? Or is, it's this
he's cast himself for sure there, right? Okay. Because the cold is going to reduce the effects of Agarium. And let me say, this is all TV logic. Right. No, I hadn't thought he's outcast himself there. Okay. But that's interesting thought to think of, that there was a civilization before there. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
And I actually picked up on it when I watched the episode today, was he actually made a comment that his son was the last born of Krydor.
You're right. Yeah. So I go back as a proper writer, I will edit, undo, and say that, yes, there was this once proud civilization there. I think that got in and whatever, there's definitely Viking motifs and things, and then the cold had eventually taken all this. But we needed some sort of like, why is this kid so important? And maybe in the first draft, I'll go back and look, but that there was this civilization there. There may have been some stuff cut there about, this proud people and things. And so you had to kind of retcon a little bit of who this Sven was and how he fit in. And, I'm sure Shiro and Legendary Defender goes deeper, but up until that, there really wasn't a lot of backstory for Sven, other than that he was at a hospital on planet Ebb. And unless I missed stuff, and believe me, I do. On the original VLD, on Voltron Defender of the Universe, I don't think there was too much of it. So it seemed to me like, oh, what would his home planet be? Who is the mom, right? It's probably Rommel. But it really was, sometimes those things are so vague and you just have to do it to drive the story forward, because if you get caught up in the details, you'll drown.
Totally.
And how did Vince know so much about Krydor?
Because he's a planet nerd.
Yeah, but we hadn't established that he was a planet nerd before this, had we?
Know what?
Well, he's super smart on everything. Why wouldn't he have? Whatever's convenient, Mark. Whatever's convenient.
Pitch
on
can
page
be a ninja.
18.
Yeah.
True.
A Pitch could be a full planet of ninja scientists and a DJ.
That's right.
I mean,
Voltron Force took liberties.
Yes.
Right. That's right.
We won't even go into Larmina and Ant
and the whole Ant thing.
Story at the time. Stop. We're not talking about that. Fans.
It's Antgate.
Yes, Antgate is definitely a thing. We needed a relationship that's a little closer than, why is she here? Everybody loves an aunt. Who doesn't want Allura as their aunt? But little did I know. But that's on me. I was the head geek in charge there, and no one will ever notice. We'll never be talking about it on a podcast 10 years later.
Jeez.
So what happens when we get to Crydor? Do you remember, Tara?
Yeah, the Allura gets out of the Black Lion.
Yes. Another scene that maybe sounds cooler on paper, that she's going to, let the Voltcom, which was totally Todd's invention, this idea of the Voltcom, and he keeps sending me, I think other shows and things have done, the armor wristband thing and all of its power, which was cool because, again, you had these levels, right? That's the hand-to-hand, then there's lion-to-lion kind of fighting, and then there's like giant robot fighting. So, again, something you write and you say, well, Allura's just going to drop, everything's not working, the whiteout, the cold, and she's just going to, spiritually connect with Blue Lion. And in your head, it's much more elaborate and beautiful. And then in the end, the animation wise, it's just kind of her walking with the thing.
Yeah.
There's so many things like that.
And
Yeah,
then
especially that wide shot. It doesn't really make it bloody obvious that she's kind of using the force, so to speak.
She's using the force. She's going to just go by her instincts because she has some sort of connection with the Blue Lion.
Yeah. But I love the idea. I agree the execution doesn't quite sell it. But
No, it doesn't sell it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe
sell
like
it
a close up or a medium shot where she's closing her eyes and maybe the palm glows or something.
Yeah.
Like, something like that. Yeah.
She should have just taken it off.
So she finds Blue Lion and she sees somebody jump out of it, and then they go into a hangar and she follows them in there, and she automatically gets this what do you call it, invisibility through her Voltcom that she's able to turn on.
Software update required for visibility. Go on.
Yeah.
And then she
Keith do that in the original show. He like turned into a walking snowman. He got cloaked. Or was it the Lion or the Vehicle episodes? Was it Keith?
There was an episode with Keith. Actually, I can't remember what planet it was on, but he actually had to go rescue Romel and from Lotor for some reason, and he cloaked himself in the snow.
Okay.
Yes, I do remember that, and do remember maybe pulling from that, copying from our own show. It's incestuous, I know.
It can happen.
I just wanted to share something that came on my feed just now. Do you remember the Finesse skateboards?
I have four of them hanging on my wall right now. I have to put the
Yeah.
other two up.
So these are the Finesse skateboard decks of all the Lions.
It's awesome. So many cool products have happened, even since my time at WEP.
But
Yes, love
these really closely resemble the Lions from Voltron Force.
Still love them. Still wish we had the toys out there. Who knows? Now with 3D printing, let's just make our own. Sorry, Bob. Cease and desist.
So she gets into the hangar and she sees this person wipe away the ice on a it looks like a crib.
Yes, the little baby microwave, little air fryer, little baby air fryer, keeping him warm.
And she gasps a little bit because she didn't realize there was a child in there. And
That's
all
right.
of a sudden he realizes she's there and they start fighting.
Right. And the child, I can't remember if I said, based on my son, I don't think he had beautiful brown hair at that time. But I tell my son for years, you can tell girls at parties that you were in a cartoon for this, whether or not it's working or not. But yeah, that's again, the black ice power in your head. It's much cooler than maybe it all kind of comes across. But the idea is the Hegarium, and he's weaponized it.
Right.
I do like how he could fire those black ice energy thingies from his weapon, and just the fact that they are black is cool. I'm reminded a little bit of the weapon from Blade Runner that had sort of a black hole effect to it when they were shooting the bullets in the very first scene, and then of course the Darksaber in Mandalorian.
Right. That little independent show. I
Yes.
will say that's a bit of Ninja Turtles going on there, right? Where they have cool weapons that they never use, because you can't
And-
have him try to chop her head off with an axe.
the
Would
black
be
the
bad.
black
So
the black ice armor was also very Viking-esque, especially in the way, the
yeah.
form of the shape of
Exactly.
the battle axes, and
Yes.
the way the
Yes.
armor looked, the kind of hornish things on the helmet. Even though I know it's not true Viking, but you know,
You got it.
It'd be cool to see somebody cosplaying that today.
yeah,
I'll do it with aluminum foil with the
and black
black
magic marker.
We'll do it. And her bow turning into a whip. These are all
Mhm.
things that, and I need to find the original documents. We actually had a chart of powers. I don't know if you've ever gotten your hands on that, but like, here is what the Voltcom can do,
Right.
and just kind of a Bible of powers that we came up
Yeah,
with.
Greg has never marked any of this down.
No,
Oh.
not at all.
Not at all. Not at all. I
I didn't take
documents
insane notes about this entire show at all. No, not at all.
I will
But,
find. I know I owe you. I owe you like a hard drive somewhere of some of the original concept art with Bob's
Oh, that
permission,
would
not my
be
IP.
so awesome. That
Yeah,
would be so
Yeah.
awesome.
I know.
Yeah. So
I know. Some of
another
the,
thing
but
that,
there exists character turns of the Viking armor exists as a character turn somewhere.
oh, awesome. That
Wow.
is so amazing. And another thing that's amazing, just to do a quick segue, is that Pidge deduces that Sven's the cat bite gave him a Hegarium infection. I sort of had the impression
Throwback.
up to this. Yeah, I sort of had the impression that up to this point in this show, Hegarium was essentially Hagar guts, if you will. I don't mean like
Right.
I don't mean like
No.
her corpse, but
Sangria.
it's the it's the essence of Hagar. So I guess apparently she still had it when she was alive. She had that at least to some effect because the cat, is able to transmit the Hegarium into the Sven. So it's pretty
Yeah, you see what we did there? It's also working in a character indirectly, again, because you've got 3 bad guys now, and just everyone needed a little bit of servicing. So, and that was going to be a big part of season 2 was Hagar's resurrection, and not unlike Legendary Defender things, like she would be the big bad of season 2 and a lot of stuff, as I recall.
I would love to have seen that, and I know that
Yeah.
this show went its own way with the voice cast, as it should. But I do think having BJ Ward back as
Oh my
Hagar
god,
in the second season would have totally rocked.
that would have been cool.
Second-
That would have been
second
cool. That was
season
one of the
would've been
goals.
Awesome.
And of course, Daniel knew all this because he's #1 fanboy for Voltron Force.
Mhm.
And
And
as soon as,
interpreting
Yeah.
for non-fans, for the kids
And-
watching, like, what is happening?
and as soon as he tells what happened with the cat giving a bite and getting the infection and everything, and Lance is, I know, Daniel, I was there.
Right.
Which is,
right.
which
I
is a
love the
good way to
banner.
say, yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
way for Lance to say, okay, you can cut the exposition, we can move on now.
Yep.
Exactly. You know
Yeah.
You know the tricks.
Yeah,
That was the end of Act 1 then.
This was a teaser in 3 acts.
Yes, and it's seeing the commercial breaks and things in there. I mean, definitely getting to what we all wanted to see, the blue and red lion fight, like
Mhm.
you have in your background there. And we wanted to see a little lion on lion action was at the top of my list. And then having the 2 opposite elements, right, compete. But I think most of it made it in there between the, fire versus ice and water.
Mhm.
I think the maze was a little more elaborate. Did the maze sequence made it, or they just pulled up walls?
It just
Yes.
sort of, you could see the walls from the top and then Red Lion
I'm
walking
watching
through
here.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a much more elaborate maze sequence of ice maze in there with all the tropes you can imagine of essentially being a mirror maze as they stalk each other. I know that was cut, and then we got some mouth weapons in there, which was something that the accessory and sidearms I was missing from Voltron Force, and in season 2 we had much more designs to get back to some of those call outs from the original Defender series of side spikes and weapons and mouth blades and things like that. So I was happy to see us put that stuff in there, and again driving Susan Corbin nuts just with like, hey, and then can you put this mouth blade in there? And here's what it looks like in the original. And, you know, again, like you're talking about, you write some of this stuff and you can imagine the ferocious, fierce action of these two lions trying to kill each other, and whether it comes across a little soft in the show, you know, but you're still like, okay, well, the essence of the storytelling beat made it in, but a much more elaborate red on blue fight.
And in
And
Defender
then-
of the Universe, that would have been Michael Bell versus Michael Bell. That would have been something.
Oh, so cool. Bell on bell. Saved by the bell.
That's some
That's
bell
right.
on bell action here. So
Bell would have been amazing.
there was banter between Lance and Sven as they were fighting, but in the end, Sven got the better of Lance in the first round,
Yes.
and he was able to get away. The whole idea that Sven has as to why he's taking Blue Lion sort of shows itself a little bit later.
Yep. He made a deal with the devil.
Yeah. So he's got that infection, and he wants both him and his son cured.
Awkward, huh? Would have been Blue Lion. What happens
Yeah.
now? Here's the good news. There's no way they were going to write another character into this. I mean, he probably would have come back. I would have seen it on season 2. He could have made a cameo and saved their butts on some planet and been a good guy. There was plans, as you all know, the cliffhanger of Voltron Force to make Daniel kind of a Boba Fett type character, really lean into his Hagarium. I candidly, and I've said this on podcasts before, I was pitching making him Stride the Tiger Fighter,
Yeah.
a character from the season 2 of the original Defender, of being this, he'd have his own tiger that he was the cast off, right, who never made it. So that would have been cool to explore. Whether or not the animation and budget, we would have supported these kind of things. And I think Legendary Defender's done a great job of, I think, the castle as the spaceship, bringing that motif back. But season 2 would have been much more a planet by planet, working title being like Rise of the Robeast. Each planet would have been, a new Robeast on there. So you would have had these different environments. Whether or not we could have pulled some of this stuff off, who knows? But somewhere I have the designs of the new lions and how they would have gotten into kind of a jet ski, or kind of they would have leaned in and rode it almost like a futuristic cycle, probably inspired by Tron Legacy or something out at the time.
Yeah, I was thinking of the Batmobile, the Tumbler Batmobile. Didn't they do
Exactly.
something like that? Yeah.
Yes, that was going to be the new enhanced lions, and much more, maybe doing a 180 turn and CGI inside some of the stuff. So, we had some cool plans, but ultimately it was a tough business decision, as far as it would have been a lot of money to get into a season 2. The toys were ready on the pallet to be made, right? And Walmart and deals, again, totally different universe. And who's to say, probably, a lot of new fans, whether or not you could have captured those new fans to buy it, I don't know. But certainly us classic fans would have been all over it. So it's cool. I think some of the toys, we had fully formed, and we haven't even gotten to the, center powers, which was something I rallied hard for, just because, again, I felt like it needed a play element like Ben 10. It needed something to evolve the idea of, because we had seen, thank you, Haim Saban, for Power Rangers, like that trick was done, the robots coming together to form a bigger robot. So I felt like it needed some sort of different play element and different thing. And I know center powers can be divisive, but I thought it was a neat surprise that gave it a little more depth. A lot of that stuff even came out of meetings with Spin Master. I have to give credit to those folks. At one time, they were courting us for toys, and I think some of those folks had come up with some of that stuff. So we just borrowed some of that. Sorry, Craig, over there. Sorry, Ronan.
What was Spin Master best known for?
Well, Bakugan was at the
Bakugan.
time. But, exactly. So there was some of that with Diecast, and they were courting us. And all in all, I love what Mattel did on classic lines, but I have to give publicly a shout out to Jeremy Padawar from Jakks Pacific at the time. And he's now gone on to awesome toys and wicked cool. Jakks rolled out the red carpet, had a huge, here's all these different prototypes and things, and at the end of the day, probably would have done the toys, based on, because that's a big commitment to actually, fill it and fight for that space on the shelves. So all things, I love the Maddie line and everything, but Mattel wasn't going to do toys without a season 2, where I think like maybe Jax would have bet on the legacy and IP of Voltron and, of mixing in classic with new stuff, and would have done stuff like Voltcons and things. But there were some great designs and super talented people at all of these places. But yeah, we probably should have went with Jax. I don't know if Bob agrees, but I can't. I also, the Matty Collector line is so good that it's hard for me to even say that. So there was awesome designs from the yellow center lion, had the mace and things I've shared at Volcon. So probably a whole other podcast we'll do on Voltron Force Season 2. Have we ever done that? Have we ever done the Season 2 podcast?
We haven't. We must. There's so many people
now
who ask about it.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll save it for that one.
So
Right.
in the story of Ghost in the Lion now, we've gotten to the part where Sven goes back to where his son is, and that's when we see Mayhawks for the first time. And at this point, Allura is there, and she finds out why he's doing all this with the Hegarium infection and everything, and the deal he made with Lotor and Mayhawks. I was trying to get it through the script, but was it originally that he only made the deal with one of them, or was it always both Mayhawks and Lotor?
My immediate answer is Mayhawks, and maybe that he wouldn't have known who Mayhawks was. He definitely would have known who Lotor was, right? You don't forget when you fall off a castle with someone and die in the Japanese version. Did I die in the Japanese version with you twice? Felt like so definitely in my mind it would have been Mayhawks coming to him, and he's desperate, he's sick, and then when Lotor, he realizes I've been conned.
Yeah. So the fourth draft of the script says, so basically there's this back and forth between Sven and Mayhawks. Then this door opens or whatever, and you see Lotor, and Sven says in the script, "Lotor, are you working with?" And then he continues in the dialogue. And then, but in the finished episode, the "are you working with" isn't there. But it's clear, I think, by the delivery that it's the same effect. He says, "Lotor, this was not part of our deal." So I still think it sells that he didn't know Lotor was involved.
Right.
And it sells that my memory was correct and I wasn't BSing you guys. But in my mind, that's exactly it. And yeah, that line might have been cut.
Yeah. And at one point, you even made a play on the word drool, because
that was Todd.
The baby was taking Mayhawks' eye and putting it in its mouth and everything. And he was drooling all over it.
Yes, that was Todd punching it up and making it a little funnier, which, Todd, to his credit, was not like an OG Voltron fan. So in his mind, the word drool was probably like, that's still kind of funny. And somewhere Peter Keith is laughing through his mustache of, that this stuff still powered through, and there'll be the drool army, drool, like spitting or something like that. These we owe Mark Handler, Handlers, and all those folks. It's all them. They started this, and we're just finishing it. Or we're keeping it going.
Drool is funny, so I'm glad the show finally kind of did a tip of the hat to them.
Someone had to say it. Someone had to point this out. You did name your massive army after a spitting up.
So Sven did call his son the last son of Crydor, and he will bring back the glory of Crydor. So apparently there is a long history there with the Viking type of people on Crydor.
And I'm seeing it in the script in red, which immediately triggers a memory that there might have been a different name for it, and we had to get it cleared. Because you would, and I'd have to look it up on Wikipedia here, but like Crydor, I think might have been, or there was another, no, I think it's Crydor, was the War Planet show, an early CGI show that might have been, it wasn't Trendmasters, but some toy company was doing where it was like planets, like you literally like Transformers, almost like GoBots, Rock Lords or something, but it was planets. And I remember one of the Crydor, like it is one of those. So you have to take a script and legally go through it and make sure that you're not grabbing some other piece of IP or something. And we do it to this day at, in television, as far as just, legal has to clear some of this stuff. Or if you're going to do a commercial campaign, So yeah, I remember Krydor. There was probably some other names for the planet at the time.
Mm.
No, Krydor got through, whatever
Yep.
happened. So,
Krydor got
yes,
through. Sounds pretty cool.
so yeah, now I do see Krydor. I'm just Googling here. I see there's some reference. See Krydor War Planets.
Boom.
I
Is it?
yeah. Well, no,
No?
unfortunately, no. But
Okay,
maybe
darn
there
it.
was a name that predated
It was the War of
Krydor that was
Planets.
rejected. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I will find that old script.
So at one point, of course, Mayhawks changes the deal, and he does say that his Agarium infection is way past treatable. In fact, he's been spending so much time enhancing Hagarium's power that it would be almost a conflict of interest to find a cure for it.
Cold. That's a cold move.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
so
I love Mayhawks.
Yes, Mayhawks turned out to be a really fun character, and I don't think we started off, and a lot of that's through Todd and the other writers fleshing him out. As we ultimately know, he was the one pulling the strings.
Yeah. So Tara, what did you think of the interaction between Sven and Mayhawks and Lotor and all that?
It was interesting. It was just reminiscent of the old show, with the way Lotor and Sven were. Just knowing how Lotor had treated Romel back in the day and over his obsession with Allura, and with the fights that they all had, and him being, when in the American version it's not Shiro, but I'm not Ryu, but Sven, as he was, in the pits. But it brought back memories, and then just to be double crossed by Mayhawks, and it just kind of played in the whole martyrdom that is Sven. I mean, he is the martyr of the series, and he's just always getting kicked when he's down. So the boy can't win.
yeah,
he can't. He's cursed.
The second act ends with Allura taking the baby and Mayhawks and Lotor taking them, and then locking the door on Sven in that hangar. And he's without his son, he's without anything, and it's really sad.
It is, because it's no matter what series it is, it everything gets taken away from him, whatever version of him he is.
It's tragic.
Whether it's the Ghost and the Lion Sven, whether it's Sven in Voltron, or no matter what reiteration of it is, even the comic book ones. When Brandon Thomas in his year one, where he was head of the team, but then he had the issue with the pills and all that, and whatever he has is always taken away from him in every storyline.
Yeah, and the third dimension, he was completely taken away from the storyline.
Yeah,
so
he wasn't even in it.
Who would have voiced him? Gosh knows. Bumped on, Allura taking the baby and was like, does that hold up? Like, the woman will take the baby and whatnot. Given though the choices of people to take the baby in the room, she's the safest bet. Yeah. But I just, you write these things.
She was the only one, right? I mean,
yeah, like, it's like, oh yeah, the woman, she knows how to hold a baby. Like it bumped. I bumped on it honestly, and may have even wrote it where you look at things now with a lens, and you're like, no. But again, I would say better baby handler over Mayhawks.
Yes.
I would also say if he's there, he's certainly better than she's there for a different reason. She's not there because she's going to be a good mommy. She's there because she is the Blue Line pilot, So I think the bases are covered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Covered the butt.
But you got to think Sven's now in this hangar and he's thinking to himself, okay, I don't have my son. I've betrayed all my friends. How am I going to make this right? How am I going to turn this around?
Right.
But Allura had left something in the crib for him, and it was like a thermal detonator or something that he's allowed to break open the door.
Yes.
And that's how we start Act 3.
I can't remember when that came in. I want to say that was a Todd note. I may have written that in of just how's he going to get out or something. I don't think that was in the original draft of that her putting the detonator in there. He's holding a thermal detonator. I mean, that would have been something added later. And then definitely don't remember cherry, blueberry, apple, lemon. So you have black ash.
Yeah,
Voltron
that all
snow
got
cone.
taken out.
Yeah, that was not in the finished episode.
That sounds like something I would write that would be taken out.
Well, it's Hunk talking about food.
Yes, also not holding
Yeah,
up.
so Tara, and to all of our viewers and listeners, basically there's a scene where they're just trying to pass time, basically, and Hunk says cherry, blueberry, apple, lemon. So if you added black licorice flavor, you'd have it, a Voltron snow cone.
Oh, jeez.
And then Pitch says,
That is Hunk.
"How can you?" Yeah, Pitch says, "How can you invent snow cone flavors while freezing on an ice planet?" Anyway,
again, that might have been Todd adding humor to it and stuff too, because that was the wrap on this episode, is that it was very dark on the first draft.
Yeah.
There were a couple areas where things were taken out, and that was probably to save on time because you can only have
100%.
23-minute episode.
Yeah.
Yes, something like that. I remember a lot. All this exists as a recording somewhere. If it's got the numbers on it, that was as recorded.
So one thing that's introduced here, Mayhawks, Allura, and the baby all get into one of these tanks.
Mm-hmm.
But then Lotor doesn't get into a tank. He is riding a Mastodon Robeast.
That's kind of metal.
Where did the Mastodon come from?
I just thought it sounded really cool. Probably an homage to an original Robeast. We've had elephant mastodon types in Defender for sure. So I just felt like it fit, and you've got to have your different Robeasts. And I sometimes like when Voltron fights things that aren't bipedal, like having two. I like when he fights things on four legs, and it just seemed like a cool. Gosh knows what I was drinking or something, and saw some Frank Fazzaria or something artwork somewhere, and thought it would be just kind of badass to see Lotor on Mastodon. And once again, you see the character designs and things. It looks really cool, and when you see it then in animation, and again, it's different levels and art direction, and everything feeds into it. So, did it come across as totally badass? But I thought pretty cool. I mean, just the design wise into it. So we had some fun.
I just wonder if the Mastodon tusks sort of visually echo the Viking horned helmet motif or something. Maybe, I don't know.
Hey, that's great. You said it. There you go. We'll go with that. I don't think I was thinking that far ahead, but I would love to say the designers might have been when they had some of that stuff, in there. And that's the talented folks who worked on the show always had some sort of insight. So you're probably onto something, Greg.
So with you writing the full script for this episode, I know you had been working with the story design and everything with Todd on all the episodes, but for this particular episode where you're the full writer, how did the animation come out for you from what you had written? And is it better or is it different from what you thought?
Well, we'll go with different on this one. I mean, right? Because it's always at your brain. I'm sure every writer has that, no matter what you're doing. So I think nowadays it's just the technology has come around so much. And whether you're, like I do now, working on a commercial or something, like you'd love to be surprised, like, oh, that's better than I had envisioned it. So definitely the show, again, had a kind of a mashed up look to a lot of the different things that maybe wasn't cohesive, but was a lighter, softer show than action series type thing. But yeah, that was a fun dynamic, and getting him. We could do a whole episode on I could probably go through each episode where a lot of these stories were cracked by Todd and I. Just late nights on the phone. I'm a very good idea bouncer guy. Todd would just sit there and bounce things, and I distinctly remember conversations we'd have around the sinking submarine episodes and ticking clocks, and what happens if this, and sometimes it was just to validate something he had come up with, but a lot of the times it was like putting a twist or challenging him, or here's how you could tie back to it. So we had a really good working relationship on a lot of these episodes on just but Todd always was the story editor. I mean, he was the keeper of the thread, and I would just try to inspire and this I say sometimes I'm a creative laxative where if you just need to get it out, you call Jeremy and like I'll sit here and like, oh well, you could do this and you could do that, blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, well wait, no, I don't like that, but I like that. And he would get off the phone and come up with stuff, and mainly my stuff would be like set pieces or twists or some sort of homage or throwback or oh, wouldn't it be cool to see this? So again, I was a fan on the inside. It was just like, what's the most interesting thing we can do at this juncture? And while servicing all the characters. But again, it was a lot. If we were to do it over again, probably just would have stuck to either the original four or these are the new ones. And we could do future podcasts on, Pantera Force and some of the early iterations of this series. Some of the fans may or may not know about it. But again, then that series, it was cool too. Like, what if we had like a lion pilot who was a lion from some feline race, lion on lion, piloting a lion. Like that was metal and badass. So I was just always looking for just what is the coolest thing.
We recently had EJ Sue on, and he had done some of the concept art for some of this early stuff for Voltron Force.
He was integral, and to my knowledge, was the designer on the Lions. I mean, he was the closer. I mean, maybe I'm going to tell it some, but EJ was the guy. I mean, that to me, anything he touched was so badass. And anytime he did a Row Beast, and I want to say he did a bunch of them, again, badass in concept form. And then, sometimes in execution, it's like, oh man, the Lotron and things like that, or the, I guess it's the Beast Row Beast, it's like, oh, and then some of the scale there. So anyway, you live and you learn. We were doing our best.
Going into the third act, the Lions are all trapped in the ice after Sven had left them like that. And particularly Daniel and Lance in the Red Lion are pretty well freezing, and they're losing power on their Voltcoms. And Lance heroically, gives his power from his Voltcom to Daniel.
Yeah. Little insight there, a little selfless act on this guy who, is generally has a shield up, but you see the lengths at which he'll go.
And of course, he says, this way you'll always remember me as cool. And and Daniel says, wait, no, that's lame. Lance, I'll remember you as lame.
That really sounds like Todd Garfield.
Yeah.
Funny. Which again, his sense of humor weaved into the show, and in another iteration, maybe this show being a little more even comedy forward with action. Maybe it was not quite a rooster, not quite a goose, and maybe that's some of it's. But yeah, it's still funny, but whether or not delivery and animation wise, there was some demented weird things going on some of these episodes.
Of course, they didn't have to worry about it because soon after that, Sven had broken out. He had restolen the Blue Lion, and this time Blue Lion was what knocked apart the ice and freed them.
He's coming around. He's turned face.
Yes. So at this point, we're seeing Sven trying to get some help from his old friends.
Yeah, he defeated them all. Now he's saved them all.
Yeah.
We want to see the reunion. We want to see the hot tag. We want to see him back. You knew we were going to have the old OGs ride again one more time. We had to.
And Daniel is the fanboy that loves that the most. The original Voltron Force rides again.
So Tara, when the Lions combine and Sven is back in the seat of the Blue Lion, what did you think?
I thought, just like you said, the OGs ride again, off to save the princess. It was, I mean, the whole episode was just a fan moment, whether you want to call it fan service or not. But when you had the 5 original back in the Voltron, it was 8-year-old me again on a Sunday morning. It was.
We had to. We weren't going to leave Crydor without one last ride.
But they didn't stay together as Voltron very long, did they?
No.
No.
This isn't about Voltron. This is about Sven. This is about, you
Right.
know,
We couldn't afford it. We had used our Voltron formation quota for the episode. May have. I mean, honestly. Got to reuse that formation animation, which was
Yeah.
cool.
So Voltron's
And then you
knocked
remember
apart.
hotly debated the music that we then switched over like halfway through the season to the original soundtrack, which many folks think that, oh, the fans demanded it. You did it. I was like, no, that was Ted Koppler demanding it. Ted Koppler, the original fan, was like, and again, you know, how the composers were totally awesome on this show. Stephen Andrews, Hal Beckett, they don't get enough credit for, I mean, the sound designers who that was my favorite part, was mixing the show. And when you'd see this animation, it felt, you know, in some cases kind of lackluster, like, you know, that wasn't quite what I was picturing. But when the music would come on and the layering and the lion things, and I remember sitting in, you know, Vancouver and the audio design thing, and it just made the show. So can't say enough good things about looks like Jorge and Wes. Those, I don't remember the specific names.
How much time did you spend in Vancouver?
Not too much. I mean, additionally during the well, I guess during a lot of the voice records for episodes, we'd go up there. But during the initial, and there was the production company of Kickstart called AOK with Heather Puttock up there, which still friends with Heather and Gordon and all the folks up there. Were fantastic. I mean, Vancouver's such a cool town, full of great creatives and a government that really pushes it. But yeah, there was just Josh Guitar there, editor wise. So they just had their nice studio up there. But it was always a blast to go up and record with the crew. But I remember right before we were set to record the first one, you know, even Ted was like, "We don't want to do this, blah blah blah, shut it down." You know, so the things that Bob maneuvered through to get this show through, these things almost don't happen. You don't see that kind of stuff. And there's a point where, oh God bless, now that Ted's gone, we can tell these stories as far as later on when Daniel takes over the Black Lion pilot, we were all in the recording studio, and Ted was very precious with, you know, Keith and Lance, and these are the characters, and probably rightfully so, Ted. A lot of Ted, you were right things there, but we hadn't told him that Daniel takes over for the Black Lion in the last episode, ultimately failing, right? Which is a great message for kids. Ted was like on his BlackBerry or something at the time, and like it kind of dawns on him what's happening. He's like, what the hell's going on? Daniel's taking over. Bob, Tiffany, and I probably distracting him or something, trying to. So you're always trying to manage all these personalities, but in the end, I think Ted's instincts were probably spot on, and we had too many characters and things. I tried to redesign all the characters right before production began. I'll find the character designs, but they were much more edgier and kind of cool and hard to describe. Not street graffiti, but it was a look, and I had a certain artist do it, and I was like, can we change them all to this? And Laura had alien ears and everything, and I wanted to push the character designs because I felt like they were kind of flat in some areas and things. And really, I mean, it was a wild look, and Ted was like, no, it's too close. So it was always trying to manage something. So it's tough with this creative stuff. It's always a thumb wrestling match. It really is, but such great memories.
I was just going to say, Voltron gets knocked apart. Basically, Sven goes about as hardcore as he possibly can, jumping out of the eye of the blue lion, basically smashing through its lens, and going hardcore against Lotor. And the planet begins to break up, and the lions are beginning to shut down from the cold, and so they have to leave him there. But before they do, of course, Allura gets back in the Black Lion, and I do have to point out this is not a reference to Voltron. This is not an Easter egg, because it's a reference to a phrase that is used a lot in Voltron Legendary Defender 5 years later, when Allura gets back in the lion and the Black Lion with Sven's son. Sven asks Keith if his son is okay, and Keith says, "Safe and warm, Sven, let's go." So, Jeremy,
Yeah.
there's an entire episode about the phrase "safe and
Safe
warm"
and warm.
and Legendary Defender.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd have to look at that. I'd
Yeah.
only I'd like to think they had to they at least sat down and watched Voltron Force and were like, all right, see what you're trying to do there, but we're gonna go a totally other direction. Which is super cool.
Yeah.
We think the Voltcom idea with having it on your wrist and everything was sort of, how they got the idea to have their connection to the Lions brought together in a weapon that they held themselves. And then it turns into something that, kind of matches their abilities.
Yeah, I think that stuff naturally comes from just thinking about different dynamics. How can you update this? So I always think that stuff is inevitable more than, oh, this was inspired that because we were all riffing on the same source material. And you start to think about the possibilities and, what could this have been? And your mind starts to wonder. And I really love how just the dynamics and the action direction and things in Legendary Defender and the sense of scale, I think they really nailed. And certainly the team behind all of that and their experience would, that I feel like this show maybe should have leaned into more of the humor. And we've seen that subsequently of things that have balanced kind of action and humor. But at the time, it was tough, like Danny Phantom and these things. Like, what was a show that had adventure? I mean, Secret Saturdays, I feel like, came through that, where it was like kind of based humor. And so maybe a more stylized version of something that looked more like Secret Saturdays. Though I don't see how you could do the Lions 2D in any way, just given the mechanics of it.
Right.
Yeah. So Tara, what did you think about the Voltron Force leaving Sven behind, and then how they buttoned up the story at the very end?
I have mixed emotions on that because Jeremy, you broke my heart. You broke my heart. But I know, but it's like, okay, did he make it out? Did he not make it out? But just to kind of see it with the axe on the ground and him walking away, that's Sven. That's what Sven does.
He's a tragic character.
He is. And as much as he wanted to be a part of the team, he was always on his own. And, it was just that lone, almost like his redemption
He's cursed.
walk. He's cursed.
It
but
was his redemption walk.
His redemption walk, because you had, like, when you were talking about him busting through the lens, that was his berserker moment. And then this is his redemption, end of his arc, in this story. And it's like, do we see him again? Do we find out what happened? Or does he go the way of the wind? It tugged on the heartstrings. It really did.
Yeah.
And again, moments you write where you're like, it'd be badass if he flew out of the lion's eye and things like that. And whether it comes across like,
but then again, this is Sven. We know he survives somehow because it's Sven.
Yeah.
Somehow. We're gonna see him. We can't let him die.
Because if Lotor survives, he has to survive.
He's gonna survive. And that was the joke with Lotor. And again, balancing villains. Did we need a Mayhawks? Does it take away from Lotor's, credibility that, Mayhawks is ultimately the one pulling the strings? But it did become kind of a South Park Kenny moment of like, oh, Lotor dies again. Again, a dark humor behind it. So one that we would keep playing on until eventually Mayhawks, double crosses him. Spoiler alert.
We have to wrap up the story of Sven's son.
Yes.
So at the end, Keith asks, how's Sven's son? And Alora says, he's perfectly healthy and with the best caretaker I know. And she says, the nanny who raised me. And you see her handing the baby to Nanny from the original series.
Off bottle.
So just something that just poked in my head. And I know you were talking about Sven's son's hair, but in the color of it, it almost matched Bandor's and Avok.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
Brothers.
Definitely.
That just kind of like dinged in my head. I can't believe I'm here. It is 13 years later.
I
I'm
think
just
we
now
need a DNA
noticing this.
test. We
Hmm
need a test. We need
I
Maury
know
Povich.
Romel is the mother. You can't tell me
So,
otherwise.
so here's
Yeah, I know that's
so,
right.
I know.
Who's the daddy? Who's the
Yep.
daddy?
so I do have one more
Terrible.
question about Sven's son. Sven was obsessed with having himself and his son cured of a Hagarium infection. At the very end, Allura says that Sven's son is perfectly healthy. Does this mean he has no infection, or that he has an infection but is still perfectly healthy and showing no outward symptoms?
Did he have one at any time, or was it all in Sven's head?
Yeah,
That's a great question. I don't have a great answer for it, other than we had to wrap up the episode, and maybe with the idea that you could play off that, and I don't know if this show was that type to bring something like that back, but I gotta feel like his, Hagarium infection, maybe he's able to control it, and maybe it's like, other things that he was worried about. But that's a good question. We needed you in the writer's room, Greg, to bring these things up and catch these things. Would you think it's all, these buttoned up pros, but it's everybody just going by the seat of your pants. And sometimes it's just stuff like, I remember Todd's expression. Sometimes you'd get notes back and the expression was show a little red. Like, even if you kind of disagree with the notes, show like that you've went in there. Yep. Got that note. Like, there's a whole art to integrating notes, kind of giving them a little bit, and you pick your hills to die on, which was a lot of the series, when it comes to the fan service, like how much can we lean in, how much without, like before we're all ultimately trying to serve the intended audience, which was a younger group that maybe had not discovered Voltron yet. So whether or not we connected with those folks, TBD, but it's nice that 2.5 million views on YouTube. Like, oh, somebody's watching this. Maybe it's us just watching it over and over again.
But in the end of the episode, they will be adding Sven to the Castle of Lions Hall of Heroes, so his son can be proud, and they will never forget him.
Yeah, it feels like the ending might have been a little darker. We might have to do a follow-up show, The Dark Side of Ghost and the Lion, and find that original draft. But I feel like that's something I would have pushed for, that would have been like, well, maybe that's a softer version of something that's like, hey, at least he's in this Hall of Lions. But I mean, kind of a downer episode to it. And there, to your point, Dara, like, oh, remember when we left that guy fighting Lotor and things? I mean, it's not great.
Yeah.
And
not a great friend move.
no. And I'm probably giving away trivia questions from VoltCon, but Ghost and the Lion falls as number 4 in the lineup of the episodes. And just so happens, I don't know if you could see that, but the blue line has the number 4 on it. I don't know if that's just pure coincidence.
What do you mean by
coincidence.
4 in the
I
line
wish
of
I could
episodes? I'm confused.
If you look at the episode listing, Ghost and the Lion's number 4 in the lineup of episodes. It's the 4th episode. Okay.
I think it's 17, right?
It's
it?
This is
actually
number
the
17.
17th episode. But if you,
it's okay, because I'm looking at iTunes and it has it listed as the 4th episode.
but if it's
That's the
here's the reason why. I'm going to tell you why, because they split it up into the first 13. Remember?
I gotcha. My bad.
So
Yep.
after they came back after the first 13, it would have been 14, 15, 16, 17. It would have been the 4th from when we came back from the break.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
I redact my statement. Sorry.
That's all right.
No, but you are right in the again, the if you're calling it whatever, season 1.5.
Right.
It
Got
still
it.
works. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
All
All right, so we've wrapped up the episode. Any final thoughts about the episode?
I mean, it was a blast to write. This was the episode I was destined to write, as far as just, again, it was a big solid for Todd and producer Loris and Bob to let me write an episode. I mean, we had written even drafts of OVAs, and my writing partner Adam and I had even written some, early outlines for what series could be, and somewhere I'll dig those up. So we always kind of, we were fans and we had written things and wanted to help write. We had no pedigree or reason to be allowed to write these things or, CSV that would allow us like, okay, here's your CV, your resume to do it. So it was just awesome to sneak in and be able to write this, and just the memory of doing that in my, childhood home. I'll never forget just being up there in the window, just blasting the music and just pounding away at this. And it really is. It was so creatively fulfilling. And even seeing it, when you see that, still this day, watch it on YouTube and you see your name up there, you're like, oh, wow. You're giddy like a kid because you can't believe it happened. But
Yeah,
I'm just glad we can still be here 10 years talking about it, and hopefully, fans discovering it.
yeah, your name appears when they're riding the jet skis.
You always wonder where they put the credits, and you always see like the directed by is always usually in kind of a place, right? And having fun with it. So yeah, it was cool. The in jokes in it, and again, it was written for fans by a fan. It's the legacy of Ghost and the Lion.
Nice.
Well, as a fan, we thank you for that. And it was, well, it was, it kind of gave him, a little closure that we kind of wanted, for him from the original series. And it was, it was good to see him back, and it was a roller coaster of emotions, through the whole episode. And thank you for that. It was needed.
Yeah, well, little do we know we'd be getting a whole series where, be one of the principal characters, and again, that's Voltron heaven, right? Like all these different iterations, and still more to come on this. So it's cool. Yeah, for future episodes, I'll dig back in the hard drives and try to find some. I know I shared season 2 stuff with Bob's permission and things in the past, and we can see kind of the Voltron Force timeline in it, and like any of the similar properties like Transformers, G.I. Joe, you have these iterations of it, so it's fun to it was a really cool time. A lot of the 80s properties kind of coming back, being reinvented. The He-Man series, I think, was from 2003, the one that so everybody was giving everything a shot. Things like Thundercats and Piers around the time, and I remember Dragon Ball Z was doing great ratings at the time on Nicktoons. Oh, we're gonna have Dragon Ball Z ratings. How old was that show? So it's all it's all just so much fun to be able to play in the sandbox, even for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well,
We'll love it, guys.
I got to ask you, is there anything cool happening at Coolfire?
Well, there's always cool things happening at Coolfire. I've gotten to scratch my animation bug and win an Emmy for Ed Herman. Ed versus Bathrooms is a series we do, Ed versus, and working with a talented animator, Zach Jones. So animation always comes up. Voltron always comes up. I just put it in an email today about teaming up with law firms. We do a lot of fun law firm marketing, kind of different things that people wouldn't expect, reality shows. So, we've sold a show to Roku, have some exciting things in development that will come out, but it's been a blast, and still in touch with Bob, and we'll still explore some independent productions and things someday as my kids are getting a little older now. Young Diego there is now 14.
Wow.
And I'll be teaching him to drive on Saturday. We'll be inside the Black Lion Scion that I still have during this time, and we'll be going over blinkers and blind spots and parking. So whether or not he thinks it's cool, but they still call me Voltron in the neighborhood around here in
nice.
the suburbs I live. I am known as Voltron. Like, what's going on, Voltron? And so it will always be a part of my life, and just a huge memory. And I can remember, splitting between LA and do I stay in St. Louis after college? And, my mother, rest her soul, was like, you should stay in St. Louis. And I said, what does St. Louis have? A Voltron. And little did I know, thanks to Tiffany and certainly Ted and all the people that I got to be the kid in the candy store for a long time, and still a big supporter. And, it sounds like some really cool stuff is happening, and always be a part of the Voltron family. So I can't wait to get the update on some of the stuff, which reminds me I need to call Bob for lunch because that's all I do is pick his brain. All right, so what's going on with this and the movie and then what and you're doing, but you all we'll catch up at VoltCon. I intend to go this year and I'll be in the RV and
Cool.
we'll all have that drink inside my RV just like it was New York.
Nice.
All right.
Love it.
Well, Mark,
Terry, you up for it?
Oh, I'll be there. I'm already booked and I'm doing the trivia panels. So yep.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We will be there.
Love it, guys.
Yeah, so we want to thank you for joining us on Let's Voltron, the official Voltron podcast, like you've never been here before. And we'll see you all next time on
Let's Voltron.
Voltron.
Let's go.